Hey, welcome to my studio here in Cave Creek, Arizona. I've been out here for about 30 years. We had snow the last couple of days, so I've got a fire going right back there in the Big Bug Creek pot-bellied stove, which I bought. Actually, was visiting with Budge Ruffner up in Prescott when I was a young buck doing a story for Arizona Highways, and I visited him in a snowstorm, and he had a pot-bellied stove in his studio, and I thought someday I'm going to get one and I'm going to have one. And I use it almost every day that I can, which is about 30 days out of the year because it's usually too warm. But I got one going right now. I don't know if you can hear it crackling, but that's one of the little joys of being in my studio. We're going to talk tonight about Billy the Kid, so I hope you got a lot of questions because I have a lot of answers. Some of them are different than from maybe last time. That's because I've grown and I've learned more. I've been studying this dude since, probably 1960. I mean, that's just crazy. I learned most of it from reading True West magazine, the magazine I bought at Desert Drugs in downtown Kingman, Arizona. And I would tell the true stories of the Old West, and I just loved that. And I also loved going up to my grandmother's house because she was from an old ranching family down by Steen's Pass, and she would tell about how we were related to outlaws. And I just loved that. It just drove me crazy to know that. And she would tell about how the outlaws would come in the middle of the night and they'd leave a horse, and sometimes the horse they left was better than the horse that they took. And so I became so fanatical on this. My mother was embarrassed, and she would say, "Don't tell people we're related to outlaws," because what she heard was that I was saying we're related to Charlie Manson, we're related to the Boston Strangler, and but I just loved that, and of course early on I became extremely enamored of Billy the Kid. In fact, my grandmother told me that. There was a fiddle player in the Animas Valley, which is in the boot heel of New Mexico, and that their fiddle teacher claimed that he was Billy the Kid. So it isn't just Brushy Bill. This goes way back and goes very, very wide. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about tonight is why in the hell would I do a third book? I've already done two, and wasn't that enough, Bob? Well, we're going to answer that question tonight. And we're also going to answer a couple of other questions. The main one being, what about the official version of the kid's death? Do you believe it? I do not. I started out believing it. I've dealt with that. We'll get into that in some specific detail. If you have questions on that, be sure to ask me, and I'll tell you about it. This third book was born out of the fact that we had totally sold out of the second edition, which was a bestseller, and we sold about 80,000 books on that, which is really well for a small press like we are. But the first book, just to kind of recap how we got to here, is the first book was born. I was going to do a graphic novel, and on Billy the Kid, and my mother had given me a used book for Christmas in 1989. And it was the saga of Billy the Kid, and I thought I knew the story. And here was this book, and it was used and from 1926, and I thought, yeah, I know this story. And so it was on Christmas Day, and I opened up the first page, and the first words of the book are, "John Chisholm knew cows." And I thought, well, that's an odd opening for a book on Billy the Kid. In fact, Billy the Kid doesn't even show up till page 13, I think it is. Anyway, I was hooked, and my wife said the kids were jumping around, opening up their presents and yelling and everything, and I'm reading this book. And finally, my wife kissed me, and Kathy said, "I'm going to bed," and I said, "I'm just going to read a little bit more." Well, 2 o'clock in the morning, I finished the book. I couldn't put it down, and when I did put it down to go to bed, I thought, I want to do this story. This is fantastic, and so. It took me quite a while. It took me till 1992 to publish the first book, and like I said, it was going to be a graphic novel. Well, I was in an art studio with Ed Mell down in Central Phoenix, and he was being repped by Suzanne Brown's on Scottsdale, Main Street in Scottsdale. And she said, "Would you bring by what you're doing? I think you might have an art show in there." So, sure enough, the next thing you know, I've got an art show at Suzanne Brown's Art Gallery in Scottsdale, and I kind of veered off from doing a graphic novel and kind of did a quasi art book, little bit of graphic novel, and a little bit of a history book. And so that book was published in October of 1992. And then I was doing follow up on it, and I was in Lincoln, New Mexico, one of my favorite places on the planet. And the late great historian Nora Hand took me aside, and she said, "Bob, I like you, but you cannot do history and humor at the same time. You've got to choose one or the other." So then I went, well, I've got to do the history. And so I backed up and did the second version, which was 70 pages longer. And I threw in everything in the kitchen sink, and I call it the kitchen sink Nora Hen version. And that was the second edition. And I had a lot of people come up to me and they'd say, "Hey, Bob, I miss your humor. How come you didn't have humor in the second book?" And I said, "Well, I got shamed out of it. I was told that you can't do history and humor." And so that kind of bugged me because I came to realize I wasn't totally wrong. It's just that you got to be really honest with the reader when you're telling them something like that. You need to couch it with, you need to make it obvious that it's humor. And that was what was bothering Nora. So fast forward now, it's been almost 30 years, and I knew I was going to do the third version. But in the interim, I had a couple of encounters that really changed my life, and one was with the top secret writer who the book is dedicated to. And if you buy the book, you'll find out who that is. But that guy, he really taught me a thing or two about being lyrical, being you can use fictional and humor aspects as long as you're honest about it and you're upfront. And I didn't know that in the beginning. I was just very naively just jumped off a cliff and figured it out on the way down, which is what my partner Ken Amorosano is famous for doing, like doing this damn live Facebook show. But anyway, hey Ken, say hi, would you? Lean over there. He's back there. He's back there. He set this up. I couldn't do this. I couldn't even turn on my computer before he came. Anyway, back to the book. So the third edition, I wanted it to have all the elements that I learned, plus 20 years of True West stories with all the top researchers in the Billy the Kid story. And that includes Frederick Nolan, that includes Robert Utley, that includes Paul Andrew Hutton, Mark Lee Gardner, I'm sorry. Drew Gomber's in there. There's just a whole bunch of Chuck Usmer, Chuck Parsons. There's just a lot of people that I've met. Leon Metz is in here, and we've published them on the pages of True West. And so the biggest problem I had doing this third edition was going back and rounding up all those wonderful new things that we've discovered and recycling them through the story and make that work. There was only one problem, and it's a problem you might know about. There's a pandemic evidently going on in the world, and all of a sudden we had to close our offices. We're working remotely, and so now I have to build this third book on Slack, which is a cousin to Zoom. And if you've been on a Zoom meeting, it's ridiculous, you know? You're muted. I can't hear you. You've frozen. And then all of a sudden somebody's dog starts barking over here, and the dog in another thing hears it, and they start barking. And so what took us, used to take us like maybe a month to put together a book, like the last one, Geronimo. It took 90 days, and just about killed me and just about killed everybody that worked on it with me. And that would include Stuart Rosebrook, our venerable editor, He is wonderful. Beth Devney, who did the editing. Robert Ray, who's done every book with me. And Ken Amorisano, our publisher, he rolled up his sleeves and dug in there and did some heavy-duty lifting as we tried to traverse this pandemic and do a book basically over the phone, which is not, I wouldn't recommend that. It's not fun. But we did it, and I'm very proud of the results. And about halfway into the production of this, I realized I needed to be honest, because probably the biggest controversy that this book is going to set off is the fact that I do not buy the death of Billy the Kid the way Pat Garrett told it. It's been told now for 100+ years, and I told it that way in the first two books, because that was the official version, and I wanted to illustrate that. And so I call them the Midnight Men, the three men, Pat Garrett, John Poe, and Tip McKinney, got word that the kid was hanging around Fort Sumner. And it was probably the Maxwells who, Pete Maxwell, the brother of Paulita Maxwell, probably tipped him off. And there was other people that Brazel and Yerby who had motives for perhaps turning the kid in. The kid was very careful. He had escaped hanging, killed his two guards. You know the story. Anyway, I just never bought the story. The idea that he was going to get a piece of meat, and they saw a man walking on the inside of the fence with his buttoning his pants. He had a knife. I don't buy it. I finally realized, or I finally made the conclusion that he was protecting the Maxwells. It was Victorian times, and to be shot in a bedroom in their house was a scandal. And I knew I had to tell that story honestly. And I if you have questions about that, I'll be glad to try to answer them. There are people who adamantly oppose this. I had a spirited exchange with Mark Lee Gardner. I used as my critique, or the linchpin of my reasoning is that Tip McKinney, or was it John Poe? I have to look it up in my own book. Admitted to a mining partner. Here it is, right here. Tip McKinney confided to a mining partner named Frederick William Gray that Garrett knew the kid would visit his Mexican sweetheart, and that the lawman showed up at the Maxwell house before Billy, tied and gagged the girl, hid behind a sofa, and shot him down like a dog. And one of the things that I was impressed with going through the third time is the kid actually has a quote that I think sums it up, and that is, he was quoted early in the Lincoln County War as saying, quote, "I'm not afraid to die like a man fighting, but I would not like to be killed like a dog unarmed." And those were prophetic words, because that is exactly how I believe he died. I've got a map of the Maxwell house. I've got how I think it came down. And as I said, Mark Lee Gardner is adamantly opposed to this version, or he doesn't buy it like I do. And he makes good points about it. You may have points to make it on your own, but this is my version. And that's why on the cover it says the final word, because that's half a joke, because there'll never be a final word on all the stories that we love about the controversy, the OK Corral, who fired first, whatever. There'll never be a final word, but this is my final word. Okay, I just knew, you know what, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm not going to do another book on this, so you might as well tell the truth, okay? So that was the big thing that happened. Another thing that I learned in the interim between the second version and the third version is that I assumed that the kid died, and that Pat Garrett wrote his book, with Ash Upson on the authentic life of Billy the Kid, and that the kid was famous, and finally they made a movie about him, and it was just an arc that just kept going higher and higher and higher. Well, what I discovered was by 1915, no one remembered Billy the Kid, and he was forgotten. It was like that was old news, and yeah. And if it wasn't for a series of incredible events that have nothing to do with the kid, we wouldn't be talking about him tonight. That's my opinion. And those events basically are that Pancho Villa, I'm not making this up, Pancho Villa wanted to attack Agua Prieta, and he was told by his sources that there was only 1,200 men there at the garrison, and Agua Prieta is right across the border from Douglas, Arizona. He was told that there would just be a small garrison there. Well, Carranza, who was the bloody president de jure of Mexico at the time, he got the blessing from the United States to use the railroad from El Paso, Texas, down to Douglas, and they got word that Pancho Villa was going to attack them, and so they sent troops and machine guns and weapons down the railroad from El Paso to Douglas and across the border, so that when Pancho Villa finally attacked, they had Klieg lights and machine guns, and Pancho Villa had ridden into a trap. Well, he was so livid about this that he later attacked Columbus, New Mexico. And you may know that story. Until 9/11, it was the only time anyone had attacked the United States. And a crime reporter in Chicago got the assignment to go down to the border and do a story on Pancho Villa attacking the United States. And so the crime reporter got off the train in Deming, went down to Columbus, interviewed people, then took the train to El Paso to follow up on the story. And he just happened to go into the Coney Island Saloon for a beer. And he idly asked the bartender, what's that pistol hanging over the bar there? What's that? And he said, oh, that was a gun that killed Billy the Kid. And the reporter goes, who's Billy the Kid? And the bartender goes, oh, he was the most famous outlaw in this area for many years ago. Well, fast forward 7 years later, Walter Noble Burns, the crime reporter, goes to visit his sister in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He borrows her car, drives out to Fort Sumner, interviews Paulita Maxwell and various other people who knew the kid, and he publishes one of the first Book of the Month Club books, the saga of Billy the Kid. And all of a sudden, this forgotten outlaw is rediscovered. He is launched. There's been 67 will be traced back to that book by Walter Noble Burns. And here's why. Because Walter Noble Burns invents the good, bad boy. He's a cold-blooded killer, and he's an all-American boy. Those don't go together. That does not fit, but that's electric. And you can draw a direct line from Billy the Kid to Elvis Presley, to James Dean, or Kurt Cobain. That's my opinion. And it's because of that book, that one book. Think about that, one book, or we wouldn't even be talking about him tonight. That's my theory, okay? And that is the book my mother gifted me on Christmas Day, 1989. That's what launched me to even do the first book. And here we are talking about the third. And the movies just keep happening. I just got the news that John Fusco is considering doing Young Guns 3. I don't know how he's going to do that story because people are getting long in the tooth. But it should be interesting because John always spins it out pretty well. And in fact, when he did Young Guns 1, nobody wanted to do it. The Westerns are dead. You can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And he pulled that right out of his ear and made it a roaring success. The other thing that that's in the book is, what was it like holding the only photo, the only known photo of Billy the Kid in my hand, because in 2010, the photograph went up for auction, and Brian LaBelle, who ran the auction at the Denver Mart in Denver, he brought it out to the True West World headquarters in Cave Creek, and I actually got to hold it. It's like the size of a credit card, and I had to wear gloves. And here's this little piece of tin, okay? And I gotta tell you, I'm not one of those guys. I'm not the cosmic cowboy. I'm not the guy who goes like, "Oh, I can see," But I felt like you could see down in it. I felt the presence of the kid. I felt it was very, very heavy, being able to actually look at that. And then I was there in Denver when it was auctioned, and I asked Brian LaBelle. I said, "What do you think the photo's going to go for?" And he said, "We're thinking about 400,000." So we did a cover story in True West magazine where we thought, well, would you pay 500,000 for this piece of tin? Because that's what we thought that would on the outside. That's what that nothing. I think the biggest photo probably was 30 grand, maybe 100 grand had been the record. Jesse James, those kind of things. Anyway, I was in there, and in the first 25 seconds of the auction, live auction, it went to 150,000, and then it went to 500,000, then it went to a million. At 1,000,005, you could just feel the electricity in the air. And when it went to 2, people were practically outside of their skin. I mean, it was that you could feel the electricity. And William Koch paid $2 million, and then there was a 300,000 buyer's reserve on it. And I was one of the first to walk up to him and asked him if he was going to go to Disneyland. It seemed funnier at the time than it does now. But it was really amazing. 2.3 million for a piece of tin that big. Now, what's interesting is that when the kid was in jail in Santa Fe, New Mexico, after Pat Garrett captured him at Stinking Spring and brought him to Santa Fe, reporters let in, and by the way, a little a little Australian guy, James B. Mills, found this story that everyone else had missed. And it's this interview that we published as a cover story this last year. And the reporter's in there talking to the kid, and he says, "Hey, you're getting kind of famous. What do you think?" And the kid says a really curious thing. He says, "There's no money in it." And that's just so ironic to me, because he paid $0.25 for that photo, all right? And it sold for 2.3 million. He just needed to hang on to it a little longer. But those kind of things just fascinate me so much. The little details of there's no money in it. That's ridiculous. So the other thing, well, once that happened, then everybody was finding photographs. We would get them, I swear, like one a week. And here's what happens on that, is that the first thing that happens is you get the email saying, I've found a photo, and I think it's Billy the Kid, and I'd like you to take a look at it. Well, then two things happen. One is you say, I would say, "Hey, look, a great photo. Do you have any provenance on that?" The Billy the Kid photo that sold for 2.3 million has excellent provenance. Dan Diedrich, a friend of the kid, had it in his family. Okay, and we know that, and you can trace it. And Pat Garrett ran that image in his book in 1881. So that's provenance. It goes back to that time, and it's really strong provenance because the kid knew Dan Diedrich. Well, in the new stuff, everybody wants to back it in. They want to, I've done photo analysis, and the cheekbones match. Well, you can put Groucho Marx in there. But here's the things that happen. First is you say, "I love the photo. That's great. I can't confirm it." And then they get mad. And then they start attacking you. And eventually, when Carol would hit my phone intercom and say, "Hey, there's a guy on line 2 with the Billy Kid photo. I'm like, I don't want to talk to him. Please, please spare me. So anyway, there's been a lot of photos. In fact, probably the most famous photo is the so-called croquet photo. And I just got a letter today, an email, castigating us for Mark Boardman specifically, who did the article, about how stupid we are that we don't realize that that's really him. And I loved Mark Boardman's response, which is, well, then tell him to go buy it. It's for sale for $5 million. Go buy it. So far, nobody has bought it. And that is the bottom line on these things. So I think I've yacked enough. Have I yacked enough, Ken? We got it going. We got more stories to tell. Are we going to take some questions?
Taking questions.
Who do we got here? We got anybody that ready to ask a few questions? I'm ready to answer. See anything there that we could do? Or hello from Silver City, New Mexico. Well, it's good to talk to you too.
Okay. Do you see your questions there on your?
I do see them.
Okay.
This is my first time, so bear with me. I've never done this, so I've got my copy going. When I'm flipping through it, it looks well done. I was thrilled to see named unpublished photos like a Pat Garrett. Do you think more pictures of Billy the Kid could pop up? And of course, that's yes. Wouldn't that be great? And I don't know if it's possible at this late date. I guess it's possible that. Well, here's the thing that I've learned, it's amazing to me. Nothing changes more than the past. I used to believe that you have the past. It's finite. It's granite. It's rock. And if you could just drill down far enough, you get to the granite, and you know the truth, and you could move on with your life. Well, the actual reality is that things are moving and changing, and what we believed in 1950, we no longer believe now. For example, we used to believe that Billy the Kid was left-handed. Well, not everybody, but some people did. In fact, they made a movie called The Left-Handed Gun starring Paul Newman. And the premise was in the 1950s is that juvenile delinquency could be traced to being left-handed. It was the oddness and stuff like that, which I take offense to because I'm left-handed. And but anyway, finally a woman probably looked at the tintype and said, I think the buttons on that vest are on the wrong side. Do you think that could? And then somebody looked at the loading port on the Winchester and he said, oh yeah, this photo is flipped. Okay, because it's a reverse on the tintype. And so everything in that photo is reversed. So scratch the movie and scratch all the theories about him being left-handed. And that's just one example of how new information or things that we once believed are turned inside out or turned upside down. And of course, that's what keeps us in business at True West Magazine. And by the way, if you'd like to get your own copy, go to truewestmagazine.com. And you can order one there. I'll even autograph it for you if you'd like.
Here's a question.
What's that? Where is it?
Didn't Paulina deny having a relationship with Billy later in her life?
Yes. When
read the question.
let me see if I can find it here.
Didn't Paulina Maxwell have a relationship with Billy later in her life?
Did Paulina Maxwell have a relationship with Billy later in life? In her life? And did she deny it? That's the key point.
Right.
And yes, Walter Noble Burns went out and interviewed Paulina, and she, like any grandmother would do, any mother who's over the age of 40 would do, they rewrite their past, and they're not going to tell you what they were doing out in a cornfield in a 1957 Chevy. You're not going to tell that story. Of course you're not. And she was coy, and she said that, in fact, Billy the Kid was enamored of Celso Gutierrez, et cetera, et cetera. But this did not fool Walter Noble Burns. And he wrote a chapter called The Belle of Old Fort Sumner, and the lawyers at the book company said, you can't run this, she'll sue us. And so he had to tone it back, okay? And so I believe that Walter Noble Burns saw through that immediately and talked to this older woman and went, "Oh, this is," and I believe that he took a bullet in the heart because he loved her, and he went to that bedroom that night. He went to the Maxwell house, and it cost him his life. And yes, she did deny it to her grave that it wasn't her. She does say a couple of kind of honest things where she said, "I will say this: if I had been in love with Billy the Kid, I would have ridden away with him on a horse, etc., etc." And which I thought was about as honest as some of the girls I've known in high school would be if you were going to talk about my teenage years, which I know you do. What else we got here?
Do you base your theory on the kid's death on what happened to Mrs. Beaudry?
Do I base my theory on what happened to the kid on Mrs. Beaudry, Manuela Beaudry? No, I'm not sure where that's going. I don't quite. No, my theory is that it doesn't make any sense. I think Garrett, Paulita Maxwell said that they were thick as thieves. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. They were known as Juan Largo and Little Casino. They gambled together. And I'm from a small town. I know how that goes, man. You're in a small town. Everybody knows everybody. You're friends with somebody, and all of a sudden you make a switch. I'm convinced that Garrett, and there's some credence for this. Garrett went to the kid and he went to Beaudry and all the guys and said, "Hey, look, I'm going to be sheriff, and I'm not going to cut you any slack. And if I'm coming for you, I believe he did that. And there's some provenance that he, in fact, told them that. But then to shoot him down unarmed, that's controversial. That's my opinion. I believe he shot down Billy Kid. I don't think he had a knife. I don't think he had his Thunderer. I think he essentially caught him with his pants down, essentially. And would I do that if I was up against somebody that desperate? Probably. And so Garrett had some explaining to do. But the bigger motive was to protect the Maxwell family and their name, and that's pretty strong stuff for a small town for that time in the 1880s. That was a big deal. Got any other questions here, Ken, we need to look at?
I think you got it covered there. I think you could wrap it up if you like. You did a nice half-hour interview there, and we're good.
So you don't. This is from Penny Elephant. So you don't believe the kid lived into his old age? Question mark. No, I don't. Here's the thing about legends is that they can't die. That's kind of the thing. And which is what made Young Guns and Young Guns 2 interesting. Is they kind of bought into the Brushy Bill story, and I can see why you don't want somebody like that to their life to be cut short. But that's part of the power of the story, is the fact that the kid it could have. And one of the things I lean on in the story is his relationship to his mother. I believe the last thing he thought about was his mother as he was lay dying on the floor. She was a wonderful woman by all accounts. We don't know that much about her, but the few recollections that are there is, and so then you have that eternal question of what would have happened to the kid and his brother had she lived, and we'll never, of course, know the answer to that. That's part of the tragedy. That's what makes this story still strong. And you got another question?
Yeah, we have a Todd Newport says, after Noble Burns' book, which movie do you think helped launch the legend?
Yeah. So which movie helped launch the legend? Well, it came out of the gate. You got the Johnny Mac Brown one, which was a big deal at the time, and you really start to in the 30s. There's a shift in the Old West icons. Certainly in the 20s, you had the top dogs were Buffalo Bill Cody, Custer for sure, Jesse James. Okay, but then at the end of, as the 20s ended and the 30s started, and you go into the Depression, you have the rise of Billy the Kid and Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. These guys were not that well known in their day. Billy the Kid more than Wyatt Earp. But you have these guys who today are standing shoulder to shoulder with Wild Bill Hickok and Custer and Jesse James and Crazy Horse, and that's fascinating to me. And it goes back to my original premise, which is nothing changes more than the past. And if Walter Noble Burns hadn't gone into that saloon, now think about that, and it's Burns who also launches the fame of Wyatt Earp. You know, Stuart Lake gets all the credit, but Burns was looking for a follow-up to the Billy the Kid story because it was a huge success, and he's a great writer. Oh my goodness, Mark Lee Gardner bought all the papers of Walter Noble Burns, and we're going to run a couple of the pieces that have never been published, and he's just so good. And so what you need to do if you want to be remembered is find a good writer, okay? Find a good writer, and maybe your life could be end up 100 years from now where we're all going, you know what, that was amazing. I mean, I didn't know that guy, you know. So good writing will carry you a long ways, which, by the way, is one of the strengths of True West Magazine. And I'm so proud of all the people who helped put that magazine out, from Stuart Rosebrook, Jana Bommersback, Sherry Monahan, Marshall Trimble. Marshall Trimble's been writing Ask the Marshal for 21 years now, and that guy never runs out of steam. You'll be talking to Marshall Trimble, okay? This is a typical conversation. Hey Marshall, hey, I heard you went up and spoke to your school. How'd that go? And he goes, you know, I spent so many years in the 4th grade, they gave me tenure. He just pulls, he'll be on the phone. He's just like a walking, wonderful machine. He's from Ash Fork on Old Route 66, and I'm from Kingman, and we kid each other that I'm a Flatlander and he's up track at Ash Fork. We had a similar childhood. We both worked in gas stations on Old Route 66. In fact, the first summer I worked at my dad's gas station, Al Bell's Flying A. I saved all summer on tips, okay? Because in those days, 4 guys attacked every car. The 4 guys, they had uniforms on, they had their name over the heart, they had little caps on, and they came out, they had bow ties. They came out, fill it with flight fuel, sir. The cars would come in. And then the second guy would wash all the windshields, the wing window and the back window. And the third guy would check all the tires. And he'd say, let me check your spare because you're going across the most dangerous desert in the world. And then the 4th guy would go into the hood and cut all the fan belts. Well, I was the 5th guy. I had my Little League cap on, and I would go up to the driver and say, do you have any jugs you'd like iced for free? And my dad had a big sign out there, jugs ice free. And so I would get tips, you know. It was amazing. And I saved $11, and I bought the biographical album of Western Gunfighters by Ed Bartholomew. And I bought it out of True West Magazine. And I still have the books right over here in the back here. And that book changed my life. And so I have that story. And Marshall Trimble has his own stories.
One last question.
Let's take one last question. What do you got there, Ken? Anything?
Did Bob Ollinger really have dimes?
Yeah,
shotgun shells?
Did Bob Ollinger really have dimes shotguns? I think that's leaned on myself. You know, the stories. There's an old Texas saying: if you're going to retell a story, you have no business retelling it unless you make it better. And so a lot of these stories have been added on to, made just a little better. I'm not sure I buy the dimes in the Robert Ollinger story.
Okay, you wrap it up then, Bob.
But you know, this has been fun. I've never done this before. I'm sorry we didn't get to answer everybody's question. How much of Billy the Kid's Do you ever converse with the writer of Young Guns? Yes, I do. I just talked to him today. John Fusco's getting ready to do Young Guns 3. I wish I could answer all these. I'm sorry. I'm getting sucked into all the questions, which is what Ken told me not to do. Anyway, I wish I could answer them all. Maybe we'll do this again. I appreciate you checking out this event tonight. And please go to truewestmagazine.com if you haven't already. And buy the 3rd edition, The Final Word, The Illustrated Life and Times of Billy the Kid. And you'll be happy you did. It will change your life. Thanks, guys.